Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maura Keefe. I'm one of the scholars in residence here, and it is my privilege to introduce to you Moses Pendleton, the founder and artistic director.
Those that want to leave, please feel no pressure to hurry. Just take your time. Nobody stumbles here on our account. So don't feel guilty if you're leaving, I'd like to go with you. But we all leave at some point. But those who want to stay, feel free to move forward or give yourself some space with some empty seats. That's nice. Nice experience. Before we get started, and if everyone can allow the slow exit, I wanted to say that there is a book made by a lifelong free end and quite a talented poet named Philip Holland, who is in the house, I trust. And he has signed the book called The Dance Must Follow, but it is, I contributed some of the material for it in some fashion. But he describes a unique creative process that I identify with, and in perfect iambic pentameter. So it's kind of old world. It's filled with wonderful cantos. You can read a half a canto for breakfast and stop there. It's a good read, and some of my photographs of sunflowers, which I attribute much of my energy to, are in that book.
You're getting a little ahead of me because there's a copy of that book in the reading room. You can take a look at it there before you buy your own copy.
Yeah, you don't have to even buy it. That's good. That's good.
Which actually, I'm so delighted that you're starting the conversation by talking about your work as a photographer, because I want to talk about the parts before we talk about the whole of this afternoon. And so maybe we start right with the visuals.
Sure.
And I've been thinking this week about how closely you, as a photographer, work with yourself as a choreographer, and then work with the production team.
Okay.
So,
yes, my interest in photography is being interested in the visual world. And so I think that it's more than a tool, it's a way to sharpen your eye. And this is, MOMIX is very eyeful and visual, like physical visual theater. Some of those pieces are something that looks like would work at MoMA or the Whitney. It's moving sculpture and playing with the choreography of light and sound and all that. So
maybe we start by talking about the projections in paper trains. That's the one with the rolls of paper.
Yes, and what happens in just subtle manipulation of light and fabric and projection surfaces, you can have a series of images that are kind of shifting before your eyes. And I think, the key word is the metamorphosis of some of the imagery, from snow geese to cocktails to something from MTV, and it's really wild. And I don't go to the shows that often, but it was quite inspiring not only to see the show but to see it in your presence. And I was very energized by your collective enthusiasm. So I wanted to thank the audience for putting up with whatever you think you might be seeing, and give it a good hand. Yes. Okay.
So one of the things that's striking about the difference between paper trails with the kind of more graphic and some words and some images of that.
Oh yes, false illusions. That's helpful. Yeah, you see the one you're talking about, the verbal, the written projections. Mm-hmm. One of them says drink, dance, death. And I'm starting to read it more carefully now. On the side, there's a little saying, "Forget what you read" or something.
So
but text has some power.
I was just going to say it adds a very different
clock with it.
A very different kind of visual element to the kind of the background for the botanicals when we see something like that. So could you say something about, from your perspective, looking just before we talk about the kinesthetics of it, how it feels to you seeing the kind of the natural versus the very human generated of the words and some of those more graphic images.
You want me to talk about the imagery?
Yeah,
Yes. Well, again, going back to the metamorphosis, that paper piece ends up looking like queen for a day or a royal wedding that's a flower that disintegrates into something like a large gray mouse, and methinks it looked like a whale at the end. And that's the thrill of this image shift, and that's what I kind of see in it. I'm not saying that that is what should be seen, but that's what I see, and that's a bit obscene, I guess.
So that the transformation of some of the elements feels like essential to the work. I'm thinking about the costumes for Marigolds, the beautiful orange dresses.
Yes, there's movement, but there must be some kind of imagery or theatrical interaction. You know, in the new piece, the coon dogs, the red dogs, and beginning now to sense what, you know, how animals interact that you can relate to. It's kind of touching at the end when he chooses one and the other walks off sort of indignantly, and the one he chooses just shrivels before him into a chunk of red meat that he's taking home to eat on. And then it howls in the end and becomes an old figure holding on to its wife. It's, you know, I don't know if you get that last image.
Well, I mean,
it's just it's the after image. It's the fade of an image that can put the image in your head once the lights are out completely. It's still there, an after image.
I mean, one of the things that is striking is that
a little brighter. You see, you know, when the wolf howls at the end over the meat,
yes,
whatever, and then the second howl is a lament over this way, so that they weren't dogs at all, but a kind of an old crone and her partner.
We see that development, though. They come out and they seem like five of the same thing, and then they start to get personalities.
Oh, it's like some sci-fi movie when they look like old grandmothers with bee masks on, and they pump them up and down to kind of communicate to each other like bees rubbing their wings or their legs or both.
But I want to go back to Marigolds. So just thinking about the kind of transformation that happens in those costumes, like you and Associate Director Cynthia Quinn are, you come up with the ideas and then you have a costume fabricator.
Well, listen, the idea comes up from the morning sun or the wind or a collective expression in the studio. It's all out there to be reassembled and put into the retort, kind of an alchemical principle of, you don't really argue what goes into the mix as long as you can mix it. You know, you just don't waste too much time with that. So there's a series of accidents that we like to capitalize on, which are our open, you know, creative times. You eventually burn it.
You mean
and
by
you
setting
save
it like
something, you know. But it's a process of ever grinding and refining, not unlike anybody's trying to do better at what they do. You know, you spend more time on it. But anyway, to answer the question about photography, that is something I spent, honestly, 99% of my time doing. And so, and Cynthia was saying, well, if you're going to spend that much time and energy on it, how can it attach itself to a new MOMIX show? You know, how can you translate your passion back on a stage, which is true. I had one of my early stage experiences right here, 50 years ago. Can I tell that story quickly? Yeah, because the vibration in the pillow is historical, and you're here adding your tear to longevity in terms of history and all this. Anyway, so history, and I would never have thought of this until I came back. It's like a college reunion. You come back, and yes, I've been reminded that I was here, 50 years ago. And on stage with me, just a quick story, is Pearl Lang. She's since gone, I think. But Pearl Lang was doing some piece, and she found that Palabolists, who really were interested in putting their slimy bodies all over the floor, like planaria or something, I don't know. Anyway, but she didn't like what it did to the surface, so she would come out with a cork bottle of Coca-Cola on this very stage and shake it like some kind of Indian ritual, and it was spraying all over. And behind her, I mean, as soon as she got off, she caught a Palabolist would try to get the coke off. So because we couldn't do the moves.
Old dancers
so we almost
trick
got
to-
in the
right,
fisticuffs.
some people want it. Some
My
people want
memory
it
of getting
sticky, and
in
some people
almost-
want it slick.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pearl and I were almost ready to duke it out, and good thing I chickened out. No one messes with Pearl Lang. Do you know her? Anyone meet her? She's lovely. Was, still is in memory.
So I want to ask you a little bit about the experimentation that's part of the creative process. And I was thinking about the section Aquaflora, the headdress, dress, cape, necklace. I don't know what we call the beautiful.
Yes,
Tell
well,
us about the experimentation.
You can see in what we do, they're costumes, but they're kind of props and costumes at the same time to create, elongate, or have the image of the human form connected to the non-human, the medusa or the cobweb or something, that you're linking with costume and to create that image. But that piece was initially made by Michael Curry, was a sculptor who does a lot of work worldwide. And he had it as a skirt. And Cynthia had the wherewithal to take the skirt and put it up on her head. So it became not just a dress, but a headdress that becomes a skirt. That was like a buzzsaw in the end, and all of that. And that's how it developed.
So you had an existing sculpture, and then you got into the studio and started to do kind of creative research, digging in, like what happens if we turn, what happens if it hits the floor, what happens if it raises up, like what's that investigation like?
Well, you create the animal, the marigold or the spinning cobweb, and you see if you can move it through time and space and put some music to it. And if you see it something mandalic, maybe that mantra, the music will help you see the mandala, the imagery. It's interesting that way. And just like the crosses in the paper piece, after all that sinful behavior, and they just melt their kind of interest in each other just becomes a projection of two crosses on their backs, and then the whole ship just moves out from port into another scene. Quite cool, quite cool.
So some of this, some of the illusion is purely in the kind of physical execution of it. I'm thinking of the excerpt from Alice, where the dancer is both gravity and not gravity simultaneously. Could you tell us a little bit about?
Well, that piece was added for the first time here. It's a solo from our production called Alice, based very, very loosely on Alice in Wonderland, but you get the point. That's going around. Hopefully we can bring it here at some point to plug it. But that was a solo done wonderfully by Sia Hagen, who employs a bungee. We kind of try to make it seem like it was a large dress of sorts. But, and also to do all that dance with the bungee and still be so beautifully delicate and balletic. And quite a tour de force.
I mean, it feels.
And those are cards. If you're wondering what that quartet was, those are actually human cards in the Alice production.
So it feels related to table in a certain way, that it's about the physical prowess of the dancer interacting
Well,
with
there's the illusion of just highly trained physical bodies. That is perhaps one of the most exciting things in dance in general, the body in motion. And in the body musical, and the body making something that's not a body, all included.
So let's talk about the assembly of Viva MOMIX. I mean, you have said in interviews that in some ways you think of it as like a visual album, side A and side B.
Yes.
So in putting together the arc of the afternoon for us, what are the things you're thinking about? Because certainly you're considering music, you're considering a solo versus a group work.
Yes, we were talking about the dynamics of MOMIX, which is like a rock album with singles on each side, A and a B perhaps. And we initially, from the very beginning with MOMIX, tried to change the dynamic of the delivery of the whatever it is you're dancing or want to show. So it's in smaller bites. TikTok has now taken over that idea to an extreme. But this was back in the 80s. And so that had the dynamic of a kind of surreal vaudeville show, and you going from one thing to another. And part of the thrill of it is you never know what to expect with MOMIX, but you don't have to wait too long before it changes if you're not so happy with what you're looking at. So that was kind of a way, like a kind of a nervous way for us to put the pieces together and present them, as I say, in this kind of vaudevillian dynamic. Quick costume changes, the music hardly stops, and even if it's dark, there's still loons to deal with, and that works. Just don't shut it down. It keeps flowing, like you're going on a kind of MOMIX trip, in which in fact you probably should.
So when you're thinking about the arc of it, it's similar to assembling an evening-length work like Botanica. That ethos you're talking about, the vaudevillian, the kind of drive of one act into another, makes you be able to assemble pieces from different works.
Yes, and so it makes it very modular. In other words, we can take this format. When Pam was saying about the work and how much there is elements from, the best of is probably more the best of what we could do now, but there are hundreds of pieces worthy of entering into this kind of modular show. It's called Viva MOMIX, but might be MORMIX next year, or MOMIX Plus, or all organic.
So fun to revisit some of the older stuff. I'm thinking about the older stuff is we were bolder when we were younger, but now we're older and moving to bolder. So could you say something about?
I did, I think.
About your.
Anyone?
Your musical choices. I'm thinking about some things that in listening to it this week, I'm thinking the human voice is interesting to you. The kind of the sense of percussion is often present. And is it that you're sitting, looking at your beautiful garden, and you're listening to things, and then
there's a deer out there.
And you get inspired by music, or do you go hunting for something, like with Alice? We could talk about that.
Well, no, you're talking about sound, which is, of sound mind. I hope I am, at least in part. But I spend a great deal of my time with headphones on, listening to various kinds of music, especially taking pictures. It almost makes cinematic, and then you see the picture because the sound is giving you some kind of like feeling that you're looking at your own movie. And it's an interesting use of, in the art world, synesthesia. The painters would paint that painting, if you see it in the Whitney. This was painted by so-and-so in the 20s, only after he listened to some Chopin, or while he was listening to Chopin. So he gave the music credit for that painting. It's the synesthesic way of working. And, I'm still experimenting with that a bit. So, we might say, that, like Balanchine was famously asked, Mr. B, what is your next ballet going to be about? And he says, well, I have no idea. I haven't chosen the music. He didn't say story or thought or anything like that. It was the sound. And I'm trying to learn how to do that, more like a composer or a mix master in Ibiza, they spinning all kinds of sounds to kind of, make a musical curve to the evening, in the vaudeville. And the way MOMIX is if you get three harsh sounds, to be that simplistic, it's just going masculine, feminine, or powerful, lyrical, and how do you mix those tones? And what kind of music will help you do that?
So the last question I want to ask you about is about the last piece. It's the one that throughout the afternoon we see things that make us laugh and that delight us, but then the vaudevillian becomes very much part of the last section.
Well, the reality that we have the puppets and the mannequins and the half-akins, or whatever you call them, womenkins, he-she-kins. There's, I think Cynthia's brilliant idea to see, we've done dummy work. We were kind of a dummy dance theater in a way, along with other things. But we thought of, we have to think of it because we own and run the company, and it's, it's not day to day, but it's close. So budgetarily, if we could create a mass of 20 dancers, some of who are alive and others are just dummies moving around, we could have a big group piece. That's how it got going. And then if you put Bach and the Brandenburg Concerto, how could you go wrong? You just have to be out there in the ballet.
Well, I mean,
it ends up being quite funny that way, because it is it's a beautiful ballet called "If You Need Somebody." Yeah, and in our day of A&I improvements, you can see some version of that's going to happen on this stage soon, I think.
The thing that's
we're real robots.
The thing that's fascinating about that, watching it from backstage this afternoon as opposed to out front, where there's plenty happening.
Yeah.
There is so much more happening in the wings, because you
In the Wings, nice title. Yes.
because of the rapid changes of what those mannequins are doing.
Yes.
So you have some faith in the dancers, obviously, that they're going to be able to.
God. The mastery of them going from the piece with the flags, into getting hooked up with their electronics. And as you saw, Ori had her costume on backwards, and there was a cavity in that first sculpture. But we knew when they became little fireflies to float around, that would give her a chance.
You're talking about the quartet that turned into a quintet today.
I know, and I'm trying to think, and folks we're always nervous because the cameras are out there running for posterity and history, and that's the piece that they will always remember. And I thought, could we just come tomorrow? Maybe we can just do a little cheating, but bring that another one. They're all doing the same thing. Just fill the cavity.
It's fascinating, though, because that is the nature of live performance, right? You've got quick changes. Somebody, right? There's the improvisation.
I think it was meant to be that way. Yeah, keep it that way. Always have a kind of a toothless image at the beginning and fill it, with the fifth dancer.
Well, what was striking to me about seeing it start as a quartet today is I think you have a real affection for quintets, that seeing 5 people on stage.
I have a daughter named Quinn. That's close.
Oh, look at that. Yeah. But so it was striking to me to see a different kind of symmetry than the quintet. Could you say something? I mean, I'm thinking about the solo versus 5 versus the group versus 20 with the masculine.
Yes, I think to play the numbers game, as one should, that we kind of try to mix it up. Mm-hmm. And I'm liking, I have my son-in-law brought, I think he was doing clams for dinner, and I kept the shells, and they're cleaned by raccoons on the porch and all this stuff. But they become a little game of a shell game, actually, with 12 shells, moving them around in space to various music. I'm playing with numbers. So what that number is, it might not necessarily be a dancer. It could be just moving clamshells, as if you're looking into the sea, and the clams are kind of being shoved around by the tide or something. Just to. But that kind of process of taking what you have, playing with it, and then you don't forget it. You record it somehow. And it goes into a musical playlist, photographic playlist. We don't spend a lot of time writing down motion. It's implied. So we try to get the picture. At least several to
So
try.
for your example, then, you have a memory of those clamshells and thinking about that might come into the studio, not in a one-to-one correspondence, but in an action.
We've done a lot of clam work, and we, and one of our old classics, which we should bring back, is called Venus Envy. Venus, Envy, and it's with Lisa Joby and Cynthia Quinn, who's here tonight, by the way, as part of the Clammendamen, and they would be the two kind of sapphic female figures. As the clamshell would open, it would sing the aria of Old Belinda. So it was really a strange cartoon of we had some famous opera singer that sang the aria. And but if it was beautifully done and the clamshell was so believably her, and inside her are two naked nymphs doing their little sculpture thing. I think it has legs, or fins, or a shell. It's a shell of an idea. It's a shell of an idea. Anyway, I don't know how we got to the sea, but
you were talking about the clams on your front porch.
Oh yeah, no, just has a. So it's like Van Gogh. You always think, wow, look at those beautiful flowers that Van Gogh painted, and I'm reading just in fascinating material called Van Gogh in Close-Up, and he talks in one section about they all thought highly of his artistic ability, so people sent him flowers. So he didn't really have a garden. He just had all these colors coming, raw colors as flowers. And he said, this is all I need, because I don't have to work on finding a subject. It's all coming to me in my little domain. And he painted all those colors to just, all he was thinking about is not representing flowers so much as contrasting colors and trying different color combinations. And I thought, isn't that a nice way to spend your day? Just concerned with contrasting colors. Beautiful. It's a Bible for me, like a Bible.
I mean, we're back to your earlier thing about your photographs being in the collection of poetry that you mentioned it when we were starting, which reminds me to invite you to the archives tomorrow. Actually, we'll be in Summer Space. Moses and I will be joined by Vladimir Angelov, and the conversation will be called You, the Choreographer. This is him, the choreographer. And we're so delighted for your work today and for being back. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.